The hearing will come to order. Good morning to everyone. We convene today a joint hearing of the Subcommittee on Communications and the Subcommittee on Consumer Protection, both subcommittees of the House Committee on Energy and Commerce. And our subject is consideration of safety issues associated with drivers distracted by wireless and other electronic communications devices. I want to acknowledge and express appreciation for the excellent cooperation of Chairman Rush of the Consumer Protection Subcommittee and his fine staff as we made preparations for today's hearing. By prior arrangement, I'll be chairing this first portion of the hearing, and Chairman Rush will then chair the balance. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration estimates that 25% of accidents involve some form of driver distraction, resulting in 5,870 deaths and more than 500,000 injuries in a recent year. Texting while driving would appear to be alarmingly prevalent, with 21% of drivers in a recent survey indicating that they have done so within the last month. Among less experienced teen drivers, that number more than doubles to 46%, and 51% of those teen drivers admitted to cell phone use while driving. The use of electronic devices while driving imperils not only the distracted drivers, but all highway users. Those who are not distracted are victims of crashes that are caused by those who are. We're interested in learning this morning whether the problem is sufficiently egregious that a federal legislative response is now required. And if that response is in fact now required, what should that response be? Some states have laws prohibiting the use of handheld cell phones by all drivers. 21 states and the District of Columbia ban all cell phone use by novice drivers, including both handheld and hands-free phones. 18 states and the District of Columbia prohibit text messaging by all drivers. And we're interested in learning how effective these laws have been and whether our witnesses believe that the time has arrived for federal legislation that practically would ban some or all of these practices, perhaps by withholding federal highway funds or some portion thereof from states that do not adopt the federally recommended prohibitions. There's also a sufficient federal role for education, and the wireless industry has launched a campaign to educate the public about the dangers of distracted driving. Is it time for the federal government to expand beyond these privately funded education efforts? Chairman Genachowski of the FCC has suggested an aggressive public education campaign somewhat similar to the highly successful one that recently promoted the digital television transition. I look forward to hearing his comments this morning on how such a campaign could be structured, including the respective roles of the public and private sectors, and his thoughts about how effective such a campaign might be. Other suggestions from our witnesses for an appropriate federal response to the problem would be welcome as well. Finally, this morning, I want to point out the excellence that has been achieved by Virginia Tech's Transportation Institute in evaluating the safety issues associated with driver distraction and inattention. Tom Dingus is the Institute's director, and he is one of our witnesses on the second panel this morning. Tom will be discussing with us the pioneering work that he and the Virginia Tech Institute have accomplished in the use of naturalistic driving studies, through which sophisticated instrumentation is installed in vehicles for the continuous monitoring of driver behavior and performance. Mr. Dingus has widely acknowledged national expertise on the use of naturalistic driving observation, having 25 years of experience in the field and having authored more than 40 books, 150 technical publications, and 20 major widely read reports on the subject. I congratulate Mr. Dingus for the advances in the field that he and the Virginia Tech Transportation Institute have achieved, and we will look forward to hearing his testimony along with that of our other witnesses this morning. That concludes my opening statement, and at this time I'm pleased to recognize the ranking Republican on our Communications Subcommittee, the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Stearns.
Good morning, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to welcome our former colleague, LaHood, and also Mr. Genachowski, the chairman of the FCC. And so I welcome all of you in taking your time to be with us. And I thank Chairman Rush for his participation, for holding this timely hearing. The fundamental question, I guess, is how do we address a very real safety issue concerning drivers that simply are distracted by electronic communication devices? The big question is legislation needed? Is regulation needed? Or would a robust educational campaign be sufficient to take care of the problem? So I look forward to our hearings on the panelists, and as new technologies continue to flourish, we are more and more distracted in our lives. This is especially true when we get behind the wheel of a car. Distraction caused by cell phone text messaging while driving increases the risk of accidents by 23.2% times in comparison to normal driving. That's according to the Virginia Tech Transportation Institute report. The report also points out that texting took a driver's focus away from the road for an average of almost 5 seconds. Enough time, the report pointed out, to travel the length of a football field at 55 miles per hour. Furthermore, according to an AAA study, 61% of teens admitted to engaging in risky behavior while driving. Of that 61%, 46% of teens admitted to sending or reading text messages while driving, and 51% talked on cell phones while driving. Now, other studies cite the use of a wireless device as the #1 source of driver inattention. Along with drunk driving, the use of electronic devices is becoming the biggest threat to driver safety, especially among our teenagers. These numbers are staggering. So the question now becomes, what do we do about it? The first and perhaps most important step is education, in my opinion. In September 2009, the wireless industry, in partnership with the National Safety Council, they launched a teen-focused education campaign to provide parents and teens with information on the dangers of distracted driving. As part of the campaign, a television public service announcement and website were developed to remind teens and novice drivers that when they're on the road, be off the phone. The PSA is the latest in a series of educational efforts undertaken by the industry dating back nearly a decade. The industry has distributed the public service announcement to more than 600 television stations across this country. The wireless industry should be commended for their ongoing educational efforts. Furthermore, federal, state, and local governments are getting involved. I commend our Secretary LaHood for convening the Distracted Driving Summit last month, and the FCC Chairman Genachowski for committing to hold a distracted driving workshop in the coming weeks. I hope that this is just the beginning of the government's educational efforts. But more obviously can be done. For example, local school districts need to encourage drivers' education teachers to spend more time talking about the dangers of using a cell phone or fiddling with an iPod while driving. Local auto clubs, civic organizations, and PTAs can get involved, as they did to help fight drunk driving. This need not be a government-run education program. However, will education be enough to stem the tide of dangerous driving habits? A growing number of states are adding laws to combat this problem. 18 states, in fact, and the District of Columbia already have passed laws making texting while driving illegal, and 7 states and the district have banned driving while talking on a handheld cell phone. If the states are going to pass their own safety laws, the question would be, does the federal government need to enact laws as well? I'd prefer at first to allow the states to address the issue without a federal mandate or withholding of federal transportation funds. One legislative proposal that has been mentioned would penalize states by withholding 25% of their federal highway funds if the state does not enact a law prohibiting drivers from writing, reading, or sending text messages while driving. In 1998, in order to promote seatbelt use, Congress opted instead to incentivize states to enact seatbelt laws. Congress created 2 grant programs to increase the use of seatbelts and child safety seats, and to encourage states to increase seatbelt use rate. While this approach may be better, I do not believe the federal government needs to to have an all-out federal program at this time, but I look forward to hearing our witnesses and more on this subject. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. I look forward to questioning some of these witnesses on this important subject. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stearns. The gentlelady from California, Ms. Eshoo, is recognized for 2 minutes.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank you and the chairman of the Consumer Protection Subcommittee for having this joint hearing, for this timely discussion about the misuse of electronics while driving, and welcome our two distinguished witnesses, Secretary LaHood and Chairman Genachowski, both obviously good friends of the House, having served here as a member of the House and also a staffer in the House. I think I come from the common sense end of the spectrum. I think everyone should follow traffic signals and the rules of the road. I think drivers should not be distracted by using electronic devices. It ought to go without saying that drivers should not have their eyes focused on an electronic device, be reading a message or texting anyone. Every state has laws to deal with reckless driving problems, and some, like California, have a stricter regime for dealing with electronic devices. In my state, no one is permitted to text while driving or using a handheld phone, and drivers under 18 may not use any electronic device at all. The New York Times has been publishing an ongoing series about the use of electronic devices and distracted driving. A recent article described the British method of enhanced penalties for dealing with electronically distracted drivers and told the sad story of a young woman who killed someone very much like herself while texting. I think that some attempts to educate drivers have backfired, as another New York Times article noted. It seems that young people laugh off the scare films about this and often see themselves as invincible. One article in the New York Times series that I found particularly troubling recounted the experiences of truck drivers. They're not kids and they're not inexperienced drivers. They're people who should know better, but it's become common practice for long-haul drivers to use full-scale computer terminals when driving. The Virginia Tech Transportation Institute found that truckers using onboard computers faced a 10 times greater risk of crashing, nearly crashing, or wandering from their lane. So we're not just dealing with texting on phones or similar devices. We have an epidemic of electronic distraction. Let's consider the problem of GPS systems, which are specifically designed for drivers. When a driver reprograms the device while barreling down the freeway at 65 miles per hour, that activity can be just as dangerous as sending a text message. So we need to make laws even-handed and inclusive. It makes no sense to require hand-free phones if someone has to dial a number. It can be the momentary distraction that can end lives. I look forward to hearing from our distinguished witnesses. Obviously, electronic devices are here to stay, and my guess is that we move into ubiquitous fourth-generation wireless devices. This problem can only worsen. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Ms. Eshoo. The gentleman from California, Mr. Radanovich, the ranking member of the Consumer Protection Subcommittee, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate you calling today's hearing on distracted driving. I was speaking a little bit earlier, but I was a little bit distracted on my BlackBerry, and I've put it down now, so I'm focused. But there's no doubt that drivers need to be attentive when driving their vehicle. Over 37,000 people die on our roads as a result of auto accidents in 2008. And although the number is quite large, the good news is that it's significantly lower than the number of fatalities in 2007. We have seen improvements in vehicle safety, and we've lowered the overall rate of auto-related deaths through multiple approaches: technology improvements that enhance vehicle safety, education campaigns to lower the incidence of drinking and driving, and greater enforcement of existing laws, including seatbelt laws. These improvements have all been accomplished through the combination of public-private partnerships as well as through cooperation between the states and federal government, and should be examined as a potential approach in reducing distracted driving. Nonetheless, there is no single cure to preventing the tragic loss of life on our roads. that is inevitable every year. A car is a several thousand-pound instrument that can travel at great speeds on the highway and needs to be regarded with respect for its capability to cause serious injury or death with one movement of driver error. Even the best technology, such as life-saving airbags, is generally limited to those inside the vehicle and cannot save pedestrians or unprotected passengers. Addressing the root causes of accidents and seeking to prevent them is good public policy. We continue to battle a never-ending fight over alcohol-impaired driving, which is the most serious factor affecting highway deaths. The current topic of distracted driving is not new. Cell phone use has been a growing fixture for more than a decade and has been in the public debate regarding its effect on driving for nearly as long. How we do it efficiently and effectively is but another question. Many states have responded with hands-free requirements for drivers that use cell phones while operating their vehicle. I'm interested in how those efforts have affected driver behavior and whether their experiences are relevant to the latest concern, texting while driving. Again, a growing number of states have assumed their traditional role of writing the laws governing driver behavior with respect to texting and enacting various laws to ban the practice. I'm sure no one here supports the notion that taking your eyes off the road is a good idea, nor that we want to be driving down the road when another driver isn't watching the road. Changing driver behavior to avoid distractions and focus on driving is the core issue of what we are addressing here today. Given that texting is disproportionately conducted by younger drivers who have grown up with this technology, the risks associated with texting while driving will only increase as the population most likely to text actually becomes a larger percentage of drivers on our roads. I believe that we should allow the states to continue to act in this area and supplement their efforts where we can with a public-private education campaign. Ultimately, as we have discovered in other laws Congress has sought to force the states to enact, it will depend in large part on effective enforcement and whether enforcement and education are sufficient deterrents to alter behavior. Early evidences suggest it's difficult to enforce a complete ban on cell phones, as many users will switch to hands-free devices that are difficult to detect. Similarly, funds available to provide for increased enforcement is a luxury that most states and the federal government do not enjoy, particularly when weighed against competing priorities to improve driver safety, such as efforts to curb drunk driving. Finally, as many of our panelists will probably agree, enforcement alone is not the solution. I have a number of questions about how we can use existing state laws combined with public-private education campaigns to improve deterrence, and whether such efforts will be effective. According to Ms. McCart's testimony, it's unclear whether the frequency of crashes in states that have enacted bans has actually been lowered when compared to crash data prior to the bans. So the evidence should be substantiated before a ban is considered as a solution if we want to improve safety. I'm equally interested in exploring how technology can be used to improve safety and discuss the specific applications being developed to address the uses of devices while driving. The technology that has made our lives much easier and made us more productive may also hold potential to mitigate many of the risks associated with the same devices. Finally, one aspect that I rarely hear discussed related to all driver safety issues, but which I believe is relevant, is the level of qualifications of the drivers. I believe in states' rights to qualify and license their residents to drive a vehicle, but I think at some point we should discuss whether the bar is set appropriately to test for competency or whether we should be encouraging the states to re-examine their approach to issuing driver's licenses. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you very much, Mr. Radanovich. The gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Barrow, is recognized for 2 minutes.
I thank the chair. The chairman has set the table by pretty much setting forth the real purposes for this hearing today. One is to raise awareness of the problem, and it is a real problem. And second, to explore whether or not a federal response is appropriate to this problem, and if so, what is the best response at the federal level. On the issue of raising awareness of this problem, I've, like a lot of folks, have thought and reflected a great deal on my own practices and what other folks do, and I can't help but think that one of the real insidious aspects of this problem is the incredible disconnect between what folks are doing and what they're feeling while they're doing it. if someone is impaired because they're under the influence of alcohol, they know that they're impaired. Deny them what you will, say what you will. Anybody who is impaired because they've had too much to drink knows that it's not having a positive impact on. As a subjective matter, they know they're at risk to the extent they're thinking about it at all. But you take somebody who's riding down the road and they're text messaging. The subjective experience is the exact opposite. Here are people who are doing two very complicated things at once, and it's sort of exhilarating in a way. It's one of the reasons why folks do it. Sometimes they do it just to show they can do it. It's an insidious aspect of this problem that the objective effects of being impaired by distraction from electronic devices is, insofar as the rest of the world is concerned, exactly the same as the impact of being impaired by being under the influence of alcohol. Insofar as the way your car behaves, there's no difference. But the subjective experience of the person who's doing it is the exact opposite. And that's one of the things I think that gets a lot of people to doing this and adds to our problem of trying to figure out what the right solution is. As far as the appropriate level of federal response is concerned, I don't know what that is, but I know this. I want to commend the Obama administration and Secretary LaHood in particular for setting a good example. The federal government is both a contributor to the problem to the extent we got rolling stock and people on the roads, but it's also setting a good example or a bad example. And the administration has set a good example by making sure that as far as federal employees are concerned, we're going to observe the highest and best standards and ban these practices. I want to commend Secretary LaHood for leading by example, and I look forward to any contributions you all have to make as to what the appropriate response is beyond that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barrow. The gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Shimkus, is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief. I want to my colleague and friend Ray LaHood, who is my mentor also, and I miss him on the floor helping me sort through some of these votes, Ray. So I just want to say that publicly. Chairman, welcome. We hope you don't make any major announcements tomorrow after visiting with us today. So we will be watching for that. Second panel, Steve Largent, our former colleague of this committee. I want to welcome you. And I have distracted driving is bad. I'm on the record that distracted driving is bad. Issue 2, I have never been for the federal government extorting highway funds to obtain some means to an end that should be decided through the state. So I look forward to the hearings. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shimkus. The gentlelady from California, Ms. Matsui, is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman Boucher, and also Chairman Rush for calling today's joint hearing. I applaud your leadership in addressing this very important issue. I'd also like to thank Chairman Genachowski and my former colleague, Secretary LaHood, for being here this morning. It is very important that we examine the safety issues caused by drivers who are distracted by communications devices. With more than 270 million cell phone subscribers, most Americans rely on wireless devices to communicate with their family, their friends, and for business purposes. Recent studies have shown that about 4 out of 5 cell phone owners make calls while driving, and nearly 1 in 5 send text messages. While several states, including my home state of California, have banned texting and the use of handheld phones while driving, such prohibitions have not deterred enough motorists from using such devices or prevented accidents as a result. In California, we've had a number of tragic incidents involving cell phones or texting, including last year's tragic commuter train accident in which the operator was texting and 25 people died. A current study by Car and Driver magazine indicated that texting poses a greater threat than driving under the influence. That being said, I'm pleased that the administration as well as the wireless industry are taking on this issue. I applaud the leadership of Secretary LaHood for bringing a renewed sense of urgency to address distracted driving in all modes of transportation, particularly vehicles that transport children. Additionally, I commend Chairman Genachowski for indicating in his testimony that the FCC will explore ways in which drivers could be informed via outreach and education programs. Moving forward, we must promote greater awareness regarding the dangers of driving while distracted. It is my hope that we get to the point where Americans see the value of safe cell phone use in the same way they view putting on a seatbelt. It is a precautionary measure they can't afford not to use. I thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this important hearing today. I look forward to working with you and our colleagues on this committee to address this issue, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Ms. Matsui. The gentleman from Nebraska, Mr. Terry, is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and witnesses, thank you for being here. And Ray, it's always great to see you here. I think we all understand that every car wreck is caused by distraction, whether it's the momentary flash of going over in your mind your opening statement and missing the stop sign, or to highly dangerous yet becoming all too common actions of texting while driving or drinking while driving. I think it's appropriate that we have the discussions here, well, maybe not here, but at least nationally have discussions regarding these dangerous activities while driving. I am concerned, though, that we are talking about taking federal action. I believe that driving laws in particular are inherent to states' rule, including ages for alcohol. Those should be up to states, and therefore I would encourage every state to look at any laws regarding texting while driving. Also, as we look here or have this discussion, I want to see where our witnesses lie on hands-free technologies, because they are obviously less distracting. Is that something that should also be banned as well? So I want to hear what the involvement recommended by the federal government and to what extent that involvement should be on hands-free wireless technologies. I'll yield back my 2 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Terry. The gentlelady from the Virgin Islands, Ms. Christensen, is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, with this hearing, I think that we may be at the beginning of a major public health advance, as many have said, much like seat belts have been. And so I thank the chairs and ranking members for holding this important hearing. And I also want to thank our witnesses and who are testifying and extend a special welcome to our former colleague, Secretary LaHood, and President and CEO Steve Largent. And Secretary LaHood, I want to take this opportunity to thank you for your commitment to this cause and fulfillment of your promise to those who you met who have lost loved ones or been victims of distracted driving, and also to thank you, Chairman Genachowski, for what you have done and plan to do to address this problem, and for reminding us also that technology has also saved lives. I made reference to seat belts, and I became a more consistent seatbelt wearer shortly before my first daughter turned 15 when she was taking driving lessons, to be an example to both of them when they began to drive. Too many young and old have lost their lives in car accidents because they did not wear seat belts, but seat belts have also saved countless lives. The same can happen with the initiatives and new technologies to reduce distractions while driving we are discussing today. I'll have to admit that I have texted while I was driving, but that's a thing of the past. From personal experience, I can tell you that just talking on the phone, even with a Bluetooth, or just looking down to change a radio channel can be a significant distraction and even lead to an accident. So for me, this is a public health issue that affects everyone, but mostly our young people. There are many dangers that threaten their lives, and we need to reduce them wherever we can, as we are exploring today. As has been said, it will take the efforts of everyone to reduce accidents caused when we take our eyes off the road to text, to call, to read, or for any other reason. I am proud to say that my district, the U.S. Virgin Islands, has enacted laws that ban the use of handheld devices, require drivers to use hand-free devices, and just last week to prohibit text messaging or watching videos while driving. So I look forward to the testimonies, and I'd like to especially thank the witnesses for the efforts they've already been undertaking, especially those who are sharing their personal tragedies with us on this issue.
Thank you, Ms. Christensen. The gentlelady from Tennessee, Ms. Blackburn, is recognized for 5 minutes. I'm sorry, for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I probably won't even use the 2 minutes, but I appreciate your graciousness of offering 5 there. I do want to welcome our former colleagues, Mr. LaHood, who is always very kind to me, Mr. Largent. We are glad to see you here, and Mr. Chairman, I am delighted that you are here with us. We welcome all of our witnesses, and Mr. Chairman, I thank you for the hearing today. I think that sometimes we grow very weary of the long arm of the federal government telling us what we can and cannot do. And we are at the same time very concerned about what we see as the distraction that is there from utensils and innovations and gadgets and items in our cars that do distract us from watching the road and keeping both hands on the wheel. I think that where we're going to move with this, and where my questioning will move with you all, is looking at where the public education responsibility is, and then if there is something that is needed there for education or not. And Mr. Chairman, I'm going to really be interested in your comments on public education. I'm always pleased to see an item where we can agree and where we can focus our energies together. So I'm going to be interested in your comments, and I applaud all the industries that have moved forward with public service education to raise the awareness and to educate our citizens, especially younger drivers, about the perils of distraction in driving. I thank you all, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Blackburn. The gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Dingell, Chairman Emeritus of the full committee, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I thank you. I commend you for convening today's hearings, and I look forward to the results of our inquiry into the distraction that relates to technological devices in driving. I particularly want to welcome our old friend, Mr. LaHood, back. Welcome back, Mr. Secretary. And I also want to welcome Chairman Genachowski of the Federal Communications Commission. I anticipate an informative discussion about the dangers posed by technological devices to driver safety, as well as roles played by government, industry, in other groups in identifying and in addressing them. Rather than focus my remarks on the finer details of the matter, I would like to take this opportunity to remind my colleagues of the necessity to ground public policy in adequate research and to provide administrators with flexibility to adopt measures of proper character in the face of change. Although we share a justified measure of concern about the relationship between use of certain technological devices and driver safety, we have to guard against enthusiastically enacting overly prescriptive statutes and directing creation of regulatory regimes that in the long term may stifle innovation and ultimately show them to be of marginal benefit to the cause of improving driver safety. By analogy, then, in response to widespread apprehension concerning the safety of consumer products, particularly children's toys, the Congress and the President enacted Consumer Product Safety Improvement Act. The result was the implementation of regulations with unnecessary broad application, coupled with a peculiar absence of flexibility in their administration by the Consumer Product Safety Commission. I would note that this committee was rather careful in its handling of those matters in a fully bipartisan way. But of course, when the matter got to the United States Senate, again, things do change. While certain issues such as texting while driving lend themselves to quite easily being addressed by statutory or regulatory resolution, I urge my colleagues to exercise a modicum of restraint in addressing the large matter at hand, thereby ensuring design and implementation of sound public policy that recognizes and incorporates the necessity that I've just mentioned. Thank you for your courtesy, Mr. Chairman. I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dingell. The gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Gingrey, is recognized for 2 minutes. And he is not here. The gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Murphy, is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome to our distinguished and esteemed panelists today. I want to say that when I was coming in from the airport the other day, when my staff driving me, we were driving slow because there was a vehicle in front of us with its turn signal on, swerving lane to lane. No one could pass us because none of us were quite clear what's going on. This vehicle eventually exited off a ramp, and I could glance over and see the driver, no hands on the wheel, hands on texting, and eyes were not even on the road. I'm surprised the driver did not end up in the Potomac River. Unfortunately, an all too common scene that we see, and one that and many times ends up with tragic consequences with auto accidents and deaths of all ages. We have that's one of the many concerns we have. Obviously, the Department of Transportation is deeply concerned about the things that contribute to that, whether it's a parent trying to scold their child in the back seat or buckle someone up when they should have done those things before the car was moving, to changing channels in the radio, to putting makeup on in the car, shaving, reaching for something underneath. All those are dangerous practices, and all those that we need to be paying attention to. But in this particular case, it's the issue of technology and how none of us can cut the tether to communicate with our officers or other people somehow as if all of these things are life and death matters. I'm looking forward to hearing any solutions to this of what can be done. All of us at times have been guilty of doing this very thing. All of us need to be paying better attention to keeping our eyes on the road and our mind on the road and finding ways to do this that are sensible, practical, and above all safe. And I'm looking forward to hearing these recommendations from both of you. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. The gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Markey, is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, very much. So we have this new phenomenon. DUI used to stand for driving under the influence. Now it stands for driving using the Internet. And this new DUI is something that obviously is a combination of the jurisdictions of the two gentlemen sitting here today. The jurisdiction of the Federal Communications Commission and Chairman Genachowski has created this anytime, anywhere communications capability, but it is now being applied over to Secretary LaHood's jurisdiction, trains, planes, and automobiles. And over there, we see pilots using computers and laptops and missing their airport by 150 miles, or subway operators who are texting when they should be looking at the next stop, or truck drivers who have their computers in their laps while they're out with 18-wheelers out on the highway. So this is clearly a huge issue. Now, in a previous generation, we would wind up mandating seatbelts, mandating airbags, trying to use technologies to protect against the deficiencies that existed in the old technology, the automotive technology, so that we could protect passengers. And Mothers Against Drunk Driving would come along, and they would urge a public education campaign so that we would discourage that kind of behavior. I think what we have to do here is to try to find solutions that perhaps could, in the same way we did with seatbelts and airbags, find new technologies that can help us to deal with this issue, find technological solutions that can help us to navigate through this labyrinth of new issues that are being created, while mindful of the fatalities that are being created across our country because of the recombinant political, technological DNA that Chairman Genachowski and Secretary LaHood's jurisdictions are now bringing to our attention. We thank you, for both of you, for your work on this issue. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Markey. The gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Scalise, is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With the technological advancements in wireless and electronic communications, we're now enjoying greater use of our cell phones and are communicating in ways never imagined. These advancements include hands-free devices as well as vehicles with built-in phones, both of which have improved our ability to communicate. But even with all of these advances, drivers still face countless distractions when behind the wheel. Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the importance of this issue, and I'm glad that we're discussing safety and health of the American people. However, I do regret that we're not here today discussing the single biggest health care issue in our country, the 1,990-page government takeover of health care that we'll likely be voting on in the next week. Our committee has yet to have a hearing on the recently filed bill that will jeopardize health care for the vast majority of Americans, nor have we had the opportunity to ask direct questions about the bill to Health and Human Services Secretary Sebelius, the very cabinet official who will oversee this trillion-dollar government-run takeover of health care. Mr. Chairman, Speaker Pelosi's latest bill spends over $1 trillion on a government takeover while adding $700 billion in new taxes on families and small businesses and imposing $500 billion in cuts to Medicare. And even worse, changes are still being written behind closed doors where Speaker Pelosi and the Democrats running Congress are brokering deals and employing budget gimmicks to conceal the true cost of the bill, which led the Wall Street Journal earlier this week to call the new health care bill the worst bill ever, I quote. and decried the massive taxes, spending, and what the Wall Street Journal called, quote, dishonest accounting. This is all being done at the expense of the American people, who, if this legislation is enacted, will face rationed care, lower quality, higher premiums, and hundreds of billions in new taxes at a time when our economy can least afford it, including a new health care czar and unprecedented government control of medical care. Mr. Chairman, again let me say, I think it is a disservice to the American people if we do not hold a formal hearing on the 1,990-page government takeover of health care that Speaker Pelosi filed this week and we may be voting on in the next week. I would like to welcome our witnesses here today, and I yield back.
Thank you very much, Mr. Scalise. The gentleman from Washington State, Mr. Inslee, is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you. Obviously, if you look at the numbers, the number of Americans killed by distraction may exceed September 11th every year. This is obviously a serious issue. I appreciate the chair having this committee. The one thing I hope we look at is, and I'll look forward to the witnesses, in trying to distinguish and parse out the types of distraction, visual, auditory or textual, and cognitive. And the reason I note that is that I think where we may be heading is a way to try to reduce the first two, but the cognitive is one that's going to be something that I think Americans want to maintain the right to talk to people in their car, and I suspect they're going to want to maintain the right to talk to people out of their car once we can give them hands-free systems that do not either physically detract them from using their hands or visually detract them using their eyes. And I suspect that's where we're going to end up. So I'll be very interested in any of the testimony trying to distinguish the source and nature of that distraction that allow this technology to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Inslee. The gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Space, is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'd like to thank Chairman Rush, Ranking Members Radonovich and Stearns, as well as our witnesses. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Secretary, welcome, and thank you for your appearance today and for your attention to this issue, which is of considerable concern. I have 2 kids who are both college age, and I have to say I'm alarmed and struck by the findings and your anticipated testimony on just how dangerous texting is, specifically for young people. Certainly I can't imagine losing a family member to a distracted driver as Mr. Teater has, but certainly I hope that our work here today will help bring attention to and help us come up with some solutions for this pressing problem. I come from Ohio, and Ohio does not have a law banning texting or even using a cell phone, even teenagers using cell phones. I think we've got a long way to go, but we are making some progress. ODOT, under its director, Jolene Molitaris, recently held a mini safety summit on distracted driving, and I think we've made some significant progress there. What I think we have to do is balance out what some of our colleagues have referred to today as states' rights with what I believe to be a compelling need for public safety. And my colleagues from Washington, Mr. Inslee's reference to handheld devices is certainly not handheld, but hand-free devices. Voice activation certainly represents an attractive avenue. And I only ask that when these issues are considered, we factor in the needs of rural America as well, where we spend a lot more time in our cars than they do in many urban areas. Again, I'd like to thank both panels. Mr. Largent, nice to see you again, for your time here today, and I yield back my time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Space. The gentlelady from Ohio, Ms. Sutton, is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for holding today's hearing on this issue that is clearly affecting so many lives throughout our nation, distracted drivers. And we've all seen the drivers on the phone next to us, and we've all been stuck behind a driver who fails to see the light is turned green, and it's because they're sending a text. Or the other day, I was behind a driver who failed to move when the light turned green, and as she turned, I saw that she was holding a bowl of food that she was eating at the same time she was driving. Some of us have known someone whose life has been disrupted because of a a distracted driver. And trends in technology have only added to the number of distractions facing our drivers. And so there is growing concern about the risks associated with drivers' use of cell phones and internet technologies, texting, and other devices that are brought into vehicles. And the use of these devices does pose a serious safety risk, not only for the driver, obviously, but for other drivers and pedestrians and passengers and bicyclists. And, you know, not too long ago, my husband, who was walking our dog on a quiet neighborhood street, was hit by a car, by a distracted driver. And although he wasn't badly injured, it was certainly a wake-up call, and it was pretty startling. And if they'd hit my dog, he probably would have been killed, and then there would have been a lot of problems. So we clearly need to act. I'd like to applaud my friend, Secretary Ray LaHood, for holding a summit on this topic and for his leadership on this and so many other issues. In Ohio, the Department of Transportation Director Jolene Moller-Torres has held a summit also to explore ways to prevent texting while driving. And I'm interested in hearing from the witnesses today, from researchers and safety advocates in the industry and the administration, about how we should pursue this very complicated problem of distracted driving and what we need to do to prevent and guard against the poor safety results that occur when we allow distracted drivers to persist. And I yield back.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sutton. The gentlelady from Florida, Ms. Castor, is recognized for 2 minutes.
Well, thank you, Chairman Boucher and Chairman Rush, very much for calling this important hearing on distracted driving. I'd like to thank Secretary LaHood and Chairman Genachowski. You all have been very proactive right off the bat. You've taken very seriously the significant public safety threat that distracted driving poses to families all across America. It's a big problem in my home state of Florida, and there are many sad stories from all across the country, but one that hit home a year or so ago in St. Petersburg, Florida, where a young man named Davin Dislin was working. He checked out of work, got in his truck, left. He realized that he forgot to clock out, and as he was preparing to turn around, his cell phone went off. He reached down to get it. At the same time, he didn't realize he barreled right into a tanker truck. And the tanker had 8,500 gallons of gasoline in it. Though mercifully, it did not ignite, but Davin broke 6 ribs, his nose, a bone in his back, then was in a coma and intensive care for a few days. He was incredibly lucky. He lived, and he did not take anyone else's life. But in just the statistics for 2007 in Florida, 2,000 Floridians died due to distracted driving. Florida does not have a law banning cell phone use while driving or texting, unlike many other states and the District of Columbia. This may explain partly why we have so many deaths on our highways. Last year, the state legislature had a big knockdown, drag-out fight over this. Tried to pass a law, but they were unable to come to an agreement. I hope they'll revisit it, and I hope we can examine solutions here. I'd also like to make a public plea to parents, for parents to set a good example for their kids. When they drive and they have their children in the car, they need to be sure that they are not unnecessarily on their cell phone and are not texting themselves, so the kids learn the right habits. There's a long history in this body of enforcing national highway safety standards by using them as conditions for highway funding. That is the method by which we raise the drinking age to 21. That's how we enforce the national speed limit. I'll be interested to hear all of the witnesses' opinions as to whether we should do that in this case, in light of the research that shows equivalence between distracted driving and drunk driving. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Castor. The chairman of the Energy and Commerce Committee, the gentleman from California, Mr. Waxman, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Welcome our witnesses today. Good to see you both. I want to thank Chairman Boucher and Rush for convening this joint hearing on a compelling topic, driver distraction stemming from the use of wireless and other technological devices is a risk we all face in every mode of transportation, as drivers, passengers, pedestrians, and for many as parents. Just recently, we all read about 2 commercial pilots who lost track of time and overshot the Minneapolis airport by 150 miles because they were busy looking at personal computers. Thankfully, the passengers on that trip arrived safely. The same cannot be said for the 25 commuter rail passengers who were killed in September 2008 in my congressional district when a Metrolink train, commuter train, and a freight train collided head-on in Chatsworth, California. While that Chatsworth crash remains under investigation, the National Transportation Safety Board has focused in part on dozens of cell phone text messages received and sent by the Metrolink engineer up to 22 seconds before the crash. Today's hearing focuses on drivers' use of devices built in or brought into the passenger vehicles. Secretary LaHood, I want to thank you for your leadership and vision in recognizing the scope of this problem and organizing the recent Distracted Driving Summit. I particularly want to commend you for your role in working with President Obama to issue an executive order barring executive branch employees from texting while driving. It affects millions of federal workers and demonstrates this administration's commitment to this issue. Your continued focus will be essential for keeping up that momentum. And I also want to thank and commend Chairman Genachowski of the FCC for offering the expertise of his agency to inform the committee about where technology is headed and what the communications industry can do to promote responsible use of these devices. Your testimony gives us the opportunity to better understand the research, legislative, educational, and technological solutions that are available to address distracted driving and save lives on our roads and highways. And while my next comment does not pertain to the subject of today's hearing, this is the first time I've seen you since the FCC's release of the Notice of Proposed Rulemaking for Preserving the Open Internet, and I want to take this opportunity to compliment you on the process you are using for this rulemaking and for your commitment to data-driven decision-making. As you know, I'm a proponent of strong net neutrality rules, and I believe we're going to get a better rule as a result of your open and thoughtful approach. I also want to thank our second panel of experts, including David Teater from the National Safety Council, who brings the unique perspective of a parent who tragically lost his 12-year-old son, Joe, to a driver who ran a red light while distracted by a phone conversation. And I'm sorry for his loss, and I hope our work here today will prevent future tragedies. Thriving innovation in the technology sector is generating robust consumer demand for portable music, video, texting, phone, GPS, and Internet capabilities. The increasing availability of Bluetooth, Wi-Fi signals, and voice-activated systems to enable these devices in cars forces us to consider the challenges and opportunities these technologies may pose for safe driving. There is disagreement among researchers and among our panelists as to how and whether distraction from these technologies can be effectively measured and minimized. One key outstanding question is whether hands-free devices are any safer than handheld, and whether hands-free laws have a positive impact on driver safety. New research and development today, including an upcoming 2,000-car naturalistic driving study, offers an unprecedented opportunity to resolve some of these disputes. Strong research is essential for forming public policy. I believe we're at a critical juncture that requires an all-hands-on-deck approach, all-hands-on-the-steering-wheel approach, from government, industry, academics, and the driving public. What we've learned from decades-long campaigns to promote seatbelt use and combat drunk driving is that driver behavior is hard to change, but strong laws through research, consistent enforcement, creative education, innovative technology, and industry participation are essential ingredients for success. I welcome our witnesses, appreciate their coming forward in such a helpful manner to help us address this very critical safety issue. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Waxman. The gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Pitts, is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for holding this hearing on safety issues caused by drivers distracted by wireless and electronic communication devices. I think we all agree that distracted drivers are impediments to road safety. The National Highway Transportation Safety Administration estimates that 25% of crashes involve some form of distraction. While it is important to keep in mind that this statistic encompasses all forms of distraction and not just electronic and wireless device distraction, the rise in electronic and wireless device usage has introduced new traffic safety challenges. Texting while driving is particularly concerning as the driver is manually, visually, and cognitively distracted. I'm pleased to hear that several wireless carriers have taken it upon themselves to initiate a number of public education campaigns to increase the level of awareness on the correlation between texting and distracted driving. 21 states and the District of Columbia have passed legislation banning text messaging while driving. In fact, some states have gone further and have prohibited all drivers from talking on handheld cell phones while driving. As I'm sure we'll hear in today's testimonies, distraction from electronic and wireless devices can take many forms, and I support sensible safety requirements. I welcome our distinguished witnesses today. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses regarding this important issue, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Pitts. The gentleman from Texas, Mr. Green, is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I ask unanimous consent for my full statement to be placed in the record.
Without objection, the statements of all members will be placed in the record.
I want to thank both our chair for calling this hearing on distracted drivers, and I guess as practicing law, I would probably say my statement's going to be against interest, Mr. Chairman, because I think every one of us up here and probably everyone in the audience is probably guilty of the concerns we have. In fact, on the way in this morning, my wife pointed out that a lady next to us in traffic was actually put on her eye makeup and had her whole kit or whatever there sitting there. And most of these laws come from our state legislature. I know in Texas, we a few sessions ago passed legislation on new drivers, teenage drivers. This last session dealt with public schools, zones, and so you see the pendulum moving there. I guess my interest is that even though I use my BlackBerry, my cell phone literally all the time, I know it's dangerous. And so I think I need a law saying not to do it. But historically, we depend on our states for doing that. And there are things that are really useful. I know GM has the OnStar, Ford has provision that they can do in their sync that's successful. So there's things we can do that are hands-free. But I think I've seen the studies, like we'll probably hear today, that even if it's hands-free, it still distracts you from your eyes on the road. And so I want to thank our first panel and our second panel, particularly our first panel, because both Secretary of Transportation and our chair of the FCC, I've had the opportunity the last couple of weeks to talk with each of you. Appreciate the relationship that we have. And Chairman Waxman, I may disagree a little bit on the net neutrality, but hopefully we'll get there that all of us can support. But again, welcome you, and again, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Green. The gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Rush, the chairman of the Consumer Protection Subcommittee, has arrived, and I would ask if he would care to make an opening statement.
Mr. Chairman, I'll waive an opening statement submitted for the record in the interest of time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rush. The gentlelady from Illinois, Ms. Genachowski, is recognized for 2 minutes.
I want to welcome both witnesses, but I want to give a special acknowledgement to my former colleague from Illinois and friend Ray LaHood, and congratulate him on his leadership. In Illinois, according to the Illinois Department of Transportation, cell phone distractions were listed as either the primary or secondary cause of more than 1,000 accidents. However, serious and fatal accidents don't just happen on the highways and city streets. They also happen in our driveways and parking lots, often due to distractions. On Monday, I participated in a press conference with 5 families who had lost or nearly lost a child due to power windows. In one case, a mother pulled into the driveway of her home and put up her window to keep out the impending rain. She had noticed that her 5-year-old son had unbuckled his seat and stuck his head out the window, and by the time her daughter alerted her to the situation, the boy had already turned blue and required resuscitation. That child survived, but not all families have been so lucky. I have an excerpt from the Federal Register that reads, playing with the controls of power-operated windows can cause death through strangulation and other types of injury. Despite extensive publicity given to the National Highway Safety Bureau's public advisory, tragedies resulting from accidental operation of power windows are still being reported. This is August 1969. 1969, and we are still seeing so many thousands of, if not millions of injuries and some deaths. So NHTSA has proposed a rule that's inadequate, and as we have Secretary LaHood here today, I do intend to ask him about that proposed rule. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Genachowski. The gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Butterfield, is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. I too want to thank you, Chairman Boucher and Chairman Rush, for convening this important hearing, and thank the two witnesses for your testimony today. I think I know Secretary LaHood just a little bit better than Chairman Genachowski, but welcome to both of you. I don't come to this hearing, Mr. Chairman, with clean hands. I have been a culprit in this whole idea of texting while driving. Several months ago, I made a very deliberate decision that I was going to stop doing so, and I have done so. In my prior life, I was a trial judge and was one of the first judges in my state to have technology on the bench, and I found myself being distracted from court proceedings because I would read email and do research there on the bench. And after several months of doing that, I even stopped doing that on the bench. And so this is a real issue. Real issue not only for drivers, but those who hold critical roles in our work. And so thank you for your attention, and thank you for convening this hearing, and I look forward to changing the law so that we can protect the public as we go forward. One final story. I was riding with a friend a couple of years ago, and a teenager was in front of us, and she was driving and talking on her cell phone, and my friend said, that young teenager needs to put that telephone down and pay attention to what she's doing. And then several minutes later, his cell phone rang, and he began a conversation on his cell phone. And so I reminded him that he had just criticized a young lady in front of him, and his response was, well, I'm conducting business. She was just having a casual conversation. But we all find excuses to defend our behavior, but this is a subject that we must deal with. So thank you so very much. I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Butterfield. That concludes opening statements by members of the two subcommittees, and we welcome now our very distinguished first panel of witnesses, our former colleague from the state of Illinois, the distinguished gentleman, Ray LaHood, who is now the Secretary of the United States Department of Transportation, and also the Chairman of the Federal Communications Commission, Mr. Julius Genachowski. We're honored to have both of you with us this morning and look forward to your comments. Without objection, your prepared written statement will be made a part of the record, and we would welcome your oral summaries of approximately 5 minutes. And Secretary LaHood, we're pleased to begin with you.
Well, Chairman Boucher and Chairman Rush, thank you. And to Ranking Member Radanovich and Stearns, our thanks to you also for the opportunity to appear today to discuss the important issue of distracted driving. Transportation safety is the department's highest priority. Distracted driving is a dangerous practice that has become a deadly epidemic. Our research shows that unless we take action now, the problem is only going to get worse, especially among our nation's youngest drivers. This trend distresses me deeply, and I am personally committed to reducing the number of injuries and fatalities caused by distracted driving. About 4 weeks ago, the Department of Transportation hosted a summit to help us identify, target, and tackle the fundamental elements of the problem. We brought together over 300 experts in safety, transportation research, regulatory affairs, and law enforcement. More than 5,000 people from 50 states and a dozen countries participated in the summit via the web. We heard from several young adults who had engaged in distracted driving and who discussed the terrible consequences of their actions. We also heard from several victims of this behavior whose lives have been changed forever. Mothers and fathers who lost children and children who lost a parent told us their stories, and I want you to know, I promised these families I would make this issue my cause. The unanimous conclusion of the summit participants is that distracted driving is a serious and ongoing threat to safety. This conclusion is borne out by the facts. Our latest research shows that nearly 6,000 people died last year in crashes involving a distracted driver, and more than 500,000 people were injured. This is not a problem caused by just a few negligent drivers. To the contrary, AAA Foundation for Traffic Safety, a nonprofit educational and research organization, reports that 67% of drivers admitted to talking on their cell phones within the last 30 days while behind the wheel, and 21% of drivers indicated they had read or sent a text or email message, a figure that rose to 40% for those drivers under the age of 35. On any given day last year, an estimated 800,000 vehicles were driven by someone who used a handheld cell phone at some point during their drive. This problem is not just confined to vehicles on the road, it affects all modes of transportation. Experts agree there are three types of distraction: visual, taking your eyes off the road; manual, taking your hands off the wheel; and cognitive, taking your mind off the road. While all distractions can adversely impact safety, texting is the most troubling because it involves all three types of distractions. For all of these reasons, at the conclusion of the summit, I announced a series of concrete actions that President Obama's administration and DOT are taking to put an end to distracted driving. The President's executive order banning texting and driving for federal employees is the cornerstone of these efforts. It sends a strong, unequivocal signal to the American public that distracted driving is dangerous and unacceptable. The executive order prohibits or bans federal employees from engaging in texting messages while driving government-owned vehicles, when using electronic equipment supplied by the government while driving, and 3, while driving privately owned vehicles when on an official government business. The ban takes effect government-wide on December 30th this year. However, I've already advised all 58,000 DOT employees that they're expected to comply with the order immediately. Meanwhile, the department is taking several actions to address distracted driving, and I'm pleased to announce today that DOT and our friends at FCC are launching a joint effort to evaluate technology that may help curb distracted driving. Our department will work together to evaluate technology-based solutions to the problem and coordinate consumer outreach and education. I look forward to working with the FCC Chairman Genachowski, who will help us take advantage of FCC's technical expertise. In addition, the department has awarded demonstration programs in 2 states with handheld cell phone laws, New York and Connecticut, to test the impact of high-visibility law enforcement action on community compliance with these laws. We will evaluate these programs and report the results in about 18 months. This is taking place in Syracuse, New York, and Hartford, Connecticut. We hope this approach will prove as effective in reducing distracted driving as it has been in reducing drunk driving and increasing seatbelt use. These efforts will build on steps already underway. For instance, 1 year ago, we began enforcing limitations on texting and cell phone use throughout the rail industry. We are taking the next step by initiating 3 rulemakings or enforcements. 1, codifying restrictions on the use of cell phone and other electronic devices in rail operations. 2, to consider banning texting messages and restricting the use of cell phones by truck and interstate bus operators while operating vehicles. And 3, disqualifying school bus drivers convicted of texting while driving from maintaining their commercial driver's license. We will work aggressively and quickly to evaluate regulatory options and initiate rulemaking as appropriate. In addition, I've encouraged our state and local government partners to reduce fatalities and crashes by identifying ways that states can address distracted driving. To be sure, these measures are the beginning, not the end, to solving the problem. Drivers must take personal responsibility for their actions when they're behind the wheel. Since my time, I've gone over. The rest of this will be in the record, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Secretary LaHood. Mr. Genachowski, please.
Thank you. And thank you to Chairman Boucher and Rush and Ranking Members Stearns and Radanovich for the opportunity to testify on this important topic. I'd like to commend Secretary of Transportation Ray LaHood for his excellent statement and his leadership on this issue. As the Secretary indicated in his statement, the FCC and DOT will be partnering on a range of efforts to address this important issue, and I look forward to our agencies working together. This issue, as we've heard from many of the members, is a personal one for so many of us. I have an 18-year-old myself, and I see how he and his friends incessantly text and use technology. There's a big part of me, obviously, that's excited about all of the opportunities of technology, but boy, do I worry when he gets behind the wheel and gets on the road. And it's a conversation that we have many conversations about. This is a very real topic with serious safety implications. Let me begin by giving some context to this serious problem and then describe some avenues the FCC is pursuing.
Is your mic still on?
I apologize.
Okay.
Is it on now? Thank you. These technologies in some ways contribute to safety. When a car breaks down at night, when there's an emergency, when you're on the road, there's obvious value to having a mobile device. At the same time, however, mobile devices, especially in cars, has had some unintended and dangerous consequences. We now know that mobile communications is leading to a significant increase in distracted driving, resulting in injury and loss of life. According to AAA, nearly 50% of teens admit to texting while driving. 11% of all drivers on the road are holding an electronic device. That amounts, as we've heard, to over 800,000 distracted drivers at any given time. NHTSA reported in 2008 that driver distraction is the cause of 16% of all fatal crashes, 5,800 people killed, and 21% of crashes resulting in an injury. That's over 500,000 people injured. There's no way around it. This is an urgent problem that must be addressed. Now, I don't believe there is a single solution to this problem. All of us have a responsibility to tackle this issue, raising awareness, setting an example, pursuing other strategies, individuals, companies in the wireless space, as well as those of us in government. One necessary step is to work to develop a cultural norm that driving while texting is completely unacceptable. In this regard, I want to acknowledge that the Industry Trade Association, CTIA, in cooperation with the National Safety Council, has initiated a joint campaign with the slogan, "On the road, off the phone," focused on educating teen drivers on the dangers of distracted driving. They've devised a website for parents, and they're pursuing other educational measures. I urge all carriers to support and be innovative with this and other campaigns. On the federal level, I salute the leadership the President has shown in issuing his executive order that prohibits federal workers from texting while driving. I applaud Secretary LaHood and the Department of Transportation for taking action to raise public awareness through an impressive, coordinated effort, partnering with states and localities to encourage additional safety measures, and initiating rulemakings to address the dangers of distracted driving. At the state level, as we've heard, 18 states have already made it illegal to text while driving. Putting the brakes on the distracted driving epidemic will require both dedication and creative thinking, and the FCC is committed to doing its part to address this growing crisis. At the FCC, I reinforce to agency employees the importance of complying with the President's executive order. I believe we can play an important and constructive role in being role models and in three critical areas. First, we can seek to identify and facilitate the development of innovative technologies that could reduce the risk of distracted driving. We're already witnessing new technologies that could potentially be harnessed to generate a positive impact. We should explore a full range of technologies that can reduce or eliminate driver distractions. For example, some smartphones and other technologies allow users to control their mobile devices and vehicle systems using their voices. There may be opportunities to use RFID sensor technology and keychains that would disable selected functions on a driver's mobile device activated by the startup of their car. These are technologies worth exploring, and to help address this issue, I'm pleased to announce that the FCC will be partnering with the Department of Transportation to create a joint working group to identify and assess new technologies that could help prevent distracted driving. The DOT is already receiving numerous inquiries, as is the FCC, and we look forward to making progress. Second, the FCC can bring together industry groups, consumer and consumer advocates groups, and other stakeholders to coordinate a much broader response to the challenges of distracted driving. We intend to work with all stakeholders on educational and awareness campaigns. And third, the FCC will itself pursue consumer outreach and education on distracted driving. Our Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau has already launched a website and has begun its educational efforts. I see that my time is about to expire, so I can return to this during the questions. Let me say that we take this very seriously at the FCC. We see this as an area where the Department of Transportation and the FCC can work effectively together, where our agency with its expertise on communications can be a resource both to the Department of Transportation and to the committee as this important issue is explored.
I think both the witnesses will begin with questions, and I'd like to begin. Secretary LaHood, I'm not trying to change the subject here, but I was so moved by these families, some of whom lost children in power windows, and it's related to the issue of distraction. Often they step out of the driver steps out of the car or is distracted in the car and doesn't notice what's going on with the windows. NHTSA, as it was required by the Cameron Gulbranson Kids and Transportation Safety Act, did an investigation and proposed a rule that is just amazing. It says that there will be no cost to the rule that it proposed, and that it will save exactly 0 lives. That's the proposed rule. It says that only on windows that feature one touch or express up closing will have to have this auto reverse in it. We do it in elevators and garage doors and everything else. So I wanted to ask you if you believe that, if you've looked at that rule. If you haven't, I'd certainly like to meet with you about that. And if you think that the rule that's proposed achieves the goal of child safety.
Well, I will say this. Nobody's going to take a back seat to those of us at DOT for safety. That's our #1 priority. It is now and always will be. Number 2, I've seen the press release that you make reference to that you were involved in, and we will go back and look at the figures that are in that release and look at the study. I'll be happy to meet with you. I have reviewed the rule. If I thought the rule was not going to meet the highest safety standards, I wouldn't have agreed with it. But look at now there's additional statistics, and we'll look at it. And we'll be happy to meet with you about this. But I make no apologies for the fact that safety is our #1. That's what we care about. And if kids are going to be injured, or if people are going to be injured by the fact that we don't have the right mechanics in the cars, in the windows, we'll look at that, and we'll work with you on it.
Okay, good. Because the window that they said, the kind of window that they said had to have auto reverses generally already have that technology, and they're generally only found in the driver's window. So we can talk further about that. Thank you. I wanted to ask you about the mind distraction. You talked about that. And what evidence there is, either one of you can answer, in terms of hands-free as compared to, obviously, actually texting is the worst. But is hands-free also talking on the phone a hazard?
Madam Chair, I would say this. I would say all of these things are a distraction. We have really focused on texting because it's an epidemic. Everybody in this room is hooked on cell phones. Teenagers are hooked on texting. Now, some of us, and I'll include myself in this, I'm not smart enough or good enough to be able to text and drive. But teenagers think that they can. And there are just too many examples of children killing their friends or injuring their friends trying to text while drive. But I say this. I say eating a hamburger, shaving, putting your makeup on, any kind of distraction takes your eyes and hands and your ability to drive safely. Any of these things do. But texting while driving is our focus because it's an epidemic and because it injures our teenagers and the people around them. But we're going to focus on all kinds of distractions. Hands-free is a distraction.
Did you want to add anything, Mr. Genachowski?
No, I agree. I think there are a number of issues where it could be helpful to raise awareness, to educate the public, but there's no question that the most pressing, vital issue now is texting while driving. And it's also the area where we have the biggest opportunity to work together to create a cultural norm that is completely unacceptable. There are a number of good suggestions that were made during the opening statements. We've heard it in these statements. There's no question that texting is the priority. It's the epidemic. It's also the one where I think we can do the most in the near term to shape a changed cultural norm.
Thank you. And I yield back. Mr. Stern.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, my colleague. Mr. Secretary, you mentioned in your opening statement that there's 6,000 fatal crashes involving distracted drivers. How many involved of the 6,000 have actually, can you pinpoint to text messaging or distraction from electronic devices such as cell phone?
I'll get you the exact figure, but the majority of them, I don't have the exact figure, but I'll be happy to get it for the record.
Okay, because I think it's important if we can talk about what the actual numbers would be. I mean, when you talked about the three things of distraction, the visual, the manual, and the cognitive, I see this lots of times with my children when they have a stack of CDs on the front seat and they take their mind off to go search through those CDs. And they search through, find them, look at them while they're driving, and then put them into the CD player. And as mentioned by other people, ladies putting on makeup, you know, I oftentimes see people have their dog in the front seat, and the dog's going back and forth in the front seat while they're driving. So there's lots of things here. I agree that texting is a very serious thing. Are you advocating this morning that the federal government pass legislation much like the Schumer bill?
What I'm advocating is working with Congress to eliminate this epidemic. And we're going to work with Congress on this. We know Congress is going to do something, and we're going to work with Congress. I'm not here to endorse any bill today.
Yeah.
But we need to do something about it. I will tell you this, Mr. Stearns. 10 years ago, people had no idea what .08 is, but they know what it is now. And people 10 years ago had no idea what click it or ticket was, but they know what it is now. They know that you need to put your seatbelt on or you're going to get a ticket. And they also know that if your blood alcohol level goes above .08, you can't drive your car and you'll probably be arrested.
Reclaiming the time, just reclaiming our time here. With the seatbelt, what we did was provide grants, and we didn't penalize the states with a 25% reduction in their transportation fees. So the federal government can take lots of steps to do this and not necessarily penalize states. In fact, based upon statistics, each state could develop its own legislation. Mr. Genachowski, I have a question for you. Is there some technology-wide or things that are happening that exist that could eliminate driver distraction? You know, we've seen this with voice-activated devices. To be sure, we want to allow the driver to have emergency communication with his cell phone for whatever reason, and we wouldn't want the person to be denied the use of the cell phone for emergencies. So do you see anything down the road about technology?
We've seen, as you know, Mr. Stearns, tremendous innovation in the wireless space. I'm an optimist on technology and its ability to contribute to solutions to problems like this. Smartphones are getting smarter. There may be ways that smartphone technology, applications on smartphones can be helpful. RFID technology can be helpful here. There is a question of how far to go, how to balance the various desires that we have. We know at one end we don't want anyone texting while driving. We also know that if someone has an emergency in a car where they're sitting still, that we want them to be able to call 911 or call their family. And what we will do at the FCC, working with DOT, is begin to shine a spotlight on the different technologies that may be available and to see if there are ways to incentivize technologies, maybe increase incentives in the market to develop technologies that address the fundamental goal of safety.
Do you think, in your opinion, do you think the federal government has to do something with a legislation like the Schumer bill?
We don't have a position on the legislation other than we want to be a resource for this committee in working on education and working on developing technologies. As the committee explores legislation, we will be a resource, particularly on the communications technology component of it.
Just to divert, I can't miss this opportunity. You and I have talked a little bit about network neutrality. And perhaps you could explain why you've decided to pursue network neutrality regulations without first conducting a market analysis. As you know, I sent you a letter on this and hoping that the FCC would at least establish that there's a need for it before you issue a rule, and now you have a comment period. So I might not have an opportunity again. So I thought with my opportunity here, if you don't mind just commenting on, we are hoping that maybe you would answer my letter that I sent. I think it's 3 pages, and we had about almost 20 members of the Energy and Commerce sign it, and we're hoping that you'll answer it and perhaps give us an idea why you couldn't conduct a market analysis before you consider a net neutrality rule.
Mr. Stearns, the fundamental goal of this proceeding is to ensure that the freedom of the Internet is preserved. It is the principle of a free, unfettered, deregulated Internet that causes us to proceed. Of course, as you know, we're at the beginning of a proceeding, and open Internet deserves an open proceeding. In this proceeding, we'll be receiving lots of economic information and studies. The economic issues, the expression issues, all of the issues will be focused on over the course of this proceeding. What we wanted to do was to make sure that we had an open process with full participation from everyone as we looked at this important issue for the country.
Okay. If possible, Madam Chair, just if you possibly could answer our question with maybe just your reply to it, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
And now our Chairman Emeritus, Mr. Dingell.
Again, Mr. Secretary, welcome back.
Thank you.
Yes or no to this question? Are individual states doing a good job of adequately addressing distractions caused by drivers using technological devices? Yes or no?
Yes.
Does the Department of Transportation have sufficient authority with which to address distractions caused by drivers using technological devices? Yes or no?
Yes.
If not, are there improvements, or if so, are there improvements that should be made either by additional federal statutory or regulatory action that would either change or supplant or add to state statutory and regulatory authority? Yes or no? And then, Mr. Secretary, I'm going to ask you to submit to us a list of suggestions of what those things might be. This is not a trap, old friend.
Well, look, there's 18 states that have passed laws. I'd like to really sort of, see how we're going to interact with those, and I'll be happy to submit an answer for the record.
I'll submit to you then a question in writing on this particular
Good.
point. Because
Thank
I don't
you.
want to load you down at this particular time. Now, Mr. Secretary, should the Congress choose to write a new statute related to prevention of driver distraction caused by the use of technological device, should we adopt a measured approach? Should we have additional research? Should we look at the statistical and factual situation that we confront at this particular time, or as it might change?
Well, look, I think good research, I think good statistics, I think all of these things, I think Congress is going to move forward with some bill, and we want to work with Congress on this, and we think we can help provide some good research, some good backup information, and be a good resource.
Reason for my question, Mr. Secretary, you'll remember we danced around on the question of seat belts and airbags for a long time. And we rushed airbags with the result that we came up with a situation which frankly killed people, particularly children, frail elderly, and small women and others who are vulnerable to the explosive impact of the opening of the bag. Do we need to do a little bit of work to understand more fully what needs to be done as we move into this question?
Yes.
Now, Mr. Secretary, is it necessary or would it be wise to create an inventory of technological devices whose use in vehicles leads to drivers' distraction?
Yes, and we're going to work with the FCC and the automobile industry to do that.
Would such an inventory be useful as a basis for federal action to reduce driver distraction?
Yes.
Mr. Genachowski, welcome to you. What authorities does the Federal Communications Commission have related to prevention of driver distraction?
Well, as you know, we have authority with respect to cell phones. I think our first focus is on education of consumers, making sure that we have the information about the technology and that we are providing to this committee, as it does its work, information on the area.
Of course, my reading of the Federal Communication Acts in their various iterations indicate to me that your powers lie not with regard to regulation of the drivers, but rather of dealing with the question of the suitability, efficacy, workability, and other things relative to the communications devices as opposed to regulating the driver behavior or driver activities. Is that correct?
That's correct, and there are many areas in which communications devices and spectrum as it relates to safety is part of the FCC's work.
Now, this question, yes or no, and it'll be followed by an additional question. And do you believe that the FCC should play a greater role in reducing driver distraction as caused by the use of technological devices, yes or no?
Yes.
All right. Now, what should that additional role be? In other words, what would you expect us to ask you to do, or what is it that you would suggest that you could or should do at the Commission?
Be involved in raising awareness, education, focusing on the technologies that may be helpful in addressing this problem, bringing our expertise to bear with respect to technology devices, and the industry to help address the public safety issue that's been presented here.
Now, Mr. Genachowski, what additional statutory authority would you need to become effective in carrying out the responsibilities of the Commission as you envision them?
We at this point are not asking for any additional authority, and we're not proposing any specific rules. We want to be a resource to be helpful in education and helpful on technology.
I have the feeling, and I know my time is up, I have my feeling that you're neither suggesting or requesting additional authorities for the Commission in terms of becoming a regulatory body in terms of driver behavior. Is that correct or incorrect?
I didn't hear the first part of the question, but we are not looking to become a regulator of drivers. We will stay focused on our communications authority.
Gentlemen, thank you for your courtesy. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Radonovich.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And I want to welcome Secretary LaHood back, and also Chairman Genachowski. Thanks for being here. As we were talking and up on the panel, a lot of us were relating a lot of incidences that occur, in our personal history. I rolled up the window on my son's finger as I was taking him to ball practice. Almost went off the road once. In Yosemite National Park, there was a tragic accident many years ago where somebody was coming out of the tunnel, the Wawona Tunnel, where the best view of Yosemite, and other people were pulled off enjoying the view, and he reached down to grab a pack of cigarettes and hit some ice and went off the road and killed about 4 people in a tragic accident. So we all share this concern about driver safety, but there's a couple of things I've learned about since in preparing for this hearing, and I'm looking forward to the testimony on the next panel of a gentleman by the name of Tom Dingus, who's with Virginia Tech and the transportation studies that he has, because he's done what's called a relative crash or near crash risk estimate chart that a lot of us will have the information if you don't already. And I've noticed a couple of things, and I want to go over this and then perhaps ask 2 questions. One is that it charts all the different things that happen in a vehicle, from anywhere between adjusting the radio to text messaging, and what are the odds of these things, what's the increased probability that activity is going to lead to an accident. And I find a lot of things that are grouped into one thing, and then one particular piece of behavior that stands out dramatically more than anything else, and that's text messaging. It seems that a lot of things are grouped into the 1 to 10 times more likely that you'd be involved in an accident that includes applying makeup, reading, dialing handheld devices, handling CDs, adjusting the instrument panel. That's a tough one for me. Listening on a handheld, talking or listening to the radio, reaching for an object. in the vehicle, all those are grouped around like a likelihood of 1 or 10 more times at risk at being involved in an accident or a near accident. And what stands out as 23 times more likely to be involved, far and away beyond all the other ones, is text messaging. And I think a lot of us had included in our opening statements about text messaging, how it tends to be, as Mr. Butterfield was saying, that younger person was the one that are more inclined to be doing that, and they're more inclined to be distracted, far and away above at risk of being of causing these accidents. And my fear is that if you approach this issue from a wide open perspective, that we're going to be looking at driver's license, people wanting to get a driver's license are going to be equal to an airline pilot getting an airline pilot in the driver's seat looking like a cockpit on an airline to try to achieve the results that you want to do. I'd like to know two things, and one is from each of you. Do you recognize the clear data difference between text messaging and then all the other behaviors or at-risk behaviors as being one that stands out dramatically? And the other would be if you were to weight three things as approaches to what you think is more important, from most important to least important, and that would be the three issues I think you'd want to deal with this with, and that would be public education, innovation, relying on auto manufacturers and or communications folks through their design of their equipment and the new technology to deal with this problem, or regulation. If I can get you to rate what would be the most important approach and what would be the least approach of public education, innovation, and regulation, and then get some sense about, do you recognize that it's text messaging that is by far and away the most at-risk behavior in the vehicle?
Well, Mr. Radonovich, as I said in my testimony, I think distracted driving and text messaging is an epidemic.
Right.
I believe that. That's why we had a 2-day summit. That's why all of these people watched it on the web and came through over 300 in person and heard the horror stories from parents and family members.
My time is drawing.
I think there's three things.
Would you rate those? What do you think is most important approach, Ray? Is it
driver education?
Okay.
When you teach kids how to drive, you got to make sure they put their seatbelt on and put their BlackBerry or their cell phone in the glove compartment. I think enforcement is important. I think under 08 and seatbelts, enforcement has worked, and I also think personal responsibility. We have to take personal responsibility when we get behind the wheel of a car.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. If I can get a reaction from Mr. Genachowski, too.
I agree with the Secretary, and I'd add that focusing on technology and innovation as part of the menu of solutions is important as well.
All right. Fair enough. Thank you. Thank you.
Ms. Eshoo.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Thank you for your testimony. It's really great to see the two of you here, and I think it's an eloquent statement that you are both here, because whatever is fashioned will not be successful unless there is a highly collaborative relationship between the two of you as the leaders of this and your agencies. So thank you. My question is, there are many good questions and suggestions that have been made. My question is, where do we put the limit on electronic device use? Have you given thought to that? I can't help but think of how far we've come with technologies in our country. And I always want to see innovation motivated by everything that we do, and that we are the leaders in the world on it. So by no means do I want this effort to cut into what I just described. On the other hand, what many of our blessings are, we know are a burden when it comes to driving, and more than a burden, it can be a disaster. Should this just be with handheld devices? What about the computer terminals in trucks? Should we be looking at the regulation of GPS use? I don't know how far you've drilled down on this, but if you have any thoughts about it, I'd like your reactions. And then two things that I'd like to state before you answer the question. First, to the chairman of the FCC, I want to take this opportunity to thank you, Chairman Genachowski, for moving ahead with the net neutrality rulemaking despite pressure not to, and significant pressure not to. So I appreciate your work and your leadership on this. I think it's a highly important issue for our country. And to Secretary LaHood, you probably haven't seen this yet, but Senator Klobuchar and I just sent you a letter about our very straightforward legislation. It's a proposal that would require recipients of federal funding under the Federal Surface Transportation Program to install broadband conduit as part of the construction. It's I call this affectionately the ditch digging bill. I think it makes eminent sense. I think it's something that we have just completely, it's so common sense that we have left it out. I don't, I think it makes all the sense in the world, and we haven't done it. So I'm not going to ask you to comment on it because you probably haven't seen the letter. It just went out, but I'd like to hear back from you when you do. So anyway, back to my question about where we place some parentheses around this, that we protect innovation, but how far should we go, and if you have given any thought to this?
Well, I like your approach about putting fiber down. I think as we're doing all this stimulus, we're resurfacing and we're redigging up. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. I mean,
it really does. I mean, why build and then tear it up to put it in and then resurface it again?
Yeah, and particularly in rural areas where broadband is so important, it's the connection to the world for the rural areas. It makes a lot of sense.
Good. I'm encouraged. Good.
Look, I want to err on the side of the best safety that we can, and we're going to work with our friends at the FCC on this, but I don't think there should be no distractions when we're driving a car. There just shouldn't be. We'd save a lot of injuries and a lot of lives.
Good. Well, I appreciate your personal commitment to this. As you called it, this is a personal cause of yours, and that's going to go a long way for protecting people in the country. Mr. Chairman?
I agree, and I would just add that, and I agree also on the ditches, as you know. Technology often has this feature over the course of American history. It provides extraordinary opportunities and benefits to the country, but it can have negative effects that come with it. It's true of the car itself. And so over time, we, as a country, identify safety issues and we mobilize to tackle it, whether it's drunk driving or seat belts or child seats in cars. And over the course of experience with this, I think the core lesson for me is that the inevitability that technology will have great opportunities is true, that it will have downsides is also true, that we will address the downsides is not automatic. We have to do what the committee is doing today. We have to do what Secretary LaHood is doing and others here are doing to shine light on the dangers that are brought about by technology. Focus on education, focus on how technology can be part of the problem, focus on how government can be a role model, and focus on all innovative ideas for how government action can contribute to a solution so that we have both continuing improvement in technology innovation and that we tackle with real energy and moment the safety issues that can be presented by technology.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
The Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Pitts, for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, welcome, Secretary, and congratulations on your marvelous service to our country. Mr. Secretary, you mentioned in your testimony a rule DOT is working on to restrict the use of cell phones by truck and interstate bus operators. Could you expand on that, please?
Well, right now, if you're a truck driver, they have inboard computers and they have other devices that they use to communicate either with their base or with other truck drivers, and we know that these are a huge distraction, and so we're in the process of looking at this and trying to come up with a rule that can eliminate these distractions.
Would the use of hands-free devices be restricted as well?
Something that we're looking at, and we're in the process of really evaluating that.
What about the use of radios? For instance, listening to a radio, would that be restricted?
Well, Mr. Pitts, we're looking at all of these things. These things are all distractions.
I suppose if you're talking to someone in the car, that could be a distraction.
That's correct. If you're eating a hamburger, if you're shaving, if you're adjusting your radio, if you're trying to adjust your GPS, all of these things are distractions. They take away from your ability to drive safely.
Now, I'm sure you're familiar with H.R. 3535, the Alert Drivers Act. Subsection D requires the Secretary to promulgate minimum penalties for those using a handheld phone while driving. Could you give us a ballpark of what those minimum penalties might be if that bill became law in order to be effective?
You know, I haven't really looked at that bill, Mr. Pitts, and we're committed to working with Congress on the way forward here, but we're not endorsing any bills. I haven't looked at that, so I can't really give you.
Okay. Chairman Genachowski, in your testimony, you mentioned that we should explore a full range of technologies that can reduce or eliminate driver distraction. Could you expand on what some of those technologies might be? Also, if you would support mandatory implementation of any of those technologies in the future?
The technologies that could potentially be helpful range from various voice-to-text technologies or other hands-free technologies. As Secretary LaHood mentioned, those don't eliminate distractions. They could reduce them, and it's an open issue how to tackle those. Other technologies could eliminate particular kinds of uses while driving. For example, one could imagine technologies that disable texting while a car is in motion. We are just at the beginning of working with Secretary LaHood and the Department to catalog technologies that may be helpful. I think by shining a light on this, we help incentivize further innovation to drive solutions, and this kind of discussion is very helpful.
What has the FCC been able to learn from state-level implementation of bans on cell phone usage or texting while driving?
We're at the beginning of our data gathering and evaluation, so at this point, no lessons to report.
Do you have any plans to gather, more effective data on cell phone use or driving?
We will work together with the Department of Transportation and as a resource to the committee to continue to improve the data that helps focus attention on the most serious problems and the best solutions.
Now, you mentioned raising public awareness. What kind of things are you talking about? What tools does the FCC plan to use to raise public awareness and the dangers of cell phone usage or texting while driving?
The FCC has some experience engaging in outreach on consumer issues. It did it around digital television. It did it through a combination of working with private industry on developing a message, working in public-private partnerships on getting that message out through various platforms. Online can be effective for some audiences, but obviously not for all audiences, and there are various mechanisms for community outreach, and the more seriously one takes the need for education, the more one can do.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The Chair thanks the gentleman. The Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Barrow, for 5 minutes. You recognize the gentlelady from California, Ms. Matsui, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I won't take all of that time because I know we have a vote, and most of it's been covered. But I wanted to ask you, Chairman Genachowski, because you mentioned in the testimony the FCC will pursue consumer outreach and education programs similar to your efforts with DTV transition and broadband plan. Now, one of the many educational efforts can come from handset labeling. And what's the FCC's current role in labeling of wireless devices?
Well, labeling will be something that will be looked at as part of an overall inquiry into what kinds of educational efforts would work best.
Okay, then, do you believe that the FCC has the ability to impose consumer-oriented labeling requirements without explicit statutory authorization?
We haven't at this point studied the labeling issue. We're going to begin with a workshop on these topics very soon, and we'll look at all the issues.
Okay, but if not, well, let's say, would you welcome Congress granting you that authority?
We will work with you and the committee to provide the information that you need, and to provide recommendations as we develop views.
Okay, thank you. And one more question for Secretary LaHood. I commend you on the 2-day summit on distracted drivers, and I particularly am very, I think it's great what the administration is doing regarding to ensure that school bus drivers do not endanger our youth. I think that's really particularly very important. Do you foresee the need for the federal government to step in here and really actually enforce this, particularly with the wide range of school districts and states involved in this?
We think enforcement has got to be part of the solution, and we know that there are a number of members of Congress that have bills in the hopper, so to speak, and we're going to work with Congress on this. Enforcement works with .08 and click it or ticket. We know it works. It has to be part of the solution.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that, and I yield back.
The chair thanks the gentlelady. There's a vote that is now occurring on the floor, and I think we have a little over 5 minutes. The gentleman from Texas, Mr. Green, your turn.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know how much time. You said there was less than 5 minutes on the floor.
Would you want to wait and hold your questions?
Well, what I would like to do is just submit my questions both to the Secretary and to the Chair, and that way we can dispense.
The Chair certainly appreciates it. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Ms. Kastner, before you leave, there is a vote that's occurring, as you know. We'll reconvene. You're going to come back? You're going to try it? Okay, all right. You were listed as next. Okay. All right. Well, there's a vote that occurs, and there are at least 1 or 2 more questions that they might have. There are 4 votes. So as you know, there'll probably be anywhere from 30 to 40, 45 minutes. I'm not sure if you have the time. There are only 2 to 3 more votes. So I'll just ask those members to submit those questions in writing so we won't hold you up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Right. And so we will dismiss this panel. We want to let you know how much we appreciate you coming in and sharing your testimony with us and answering questions. And
thanks for your leadership. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Good seeing you again. Thank you so much. God bless. We will recess the hearing, and we will reconvene the hearing in about 15 minutes after the last vote. 15 minutes after the last vote, the hearing will reconvene.